start over here with Adam. Normally, we have Delia kind of call everyone's name out, but I'd like for everyone to just kind of, if you don't mind, just your name, who you're with, and if you know, maybe just kind of what your position is on this work group. We would love to be able to have that just kind of go around. I think maybe a lot of you probably already met, but just so you know, we are streaming this meeting live. So I tell you that because you want to make sure that you're not doing things on camera that you're not supposed to be doing. Trust me, I've done that before, and it's not a pretty sight. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. So if you don't mind, Adam, if you don't mind starting off with us.
Sure. Adam Colby. I'm a detective sergeant with the Tyler Police Department, and I believe the reason I'm here is for law enforcement guidance in relationship to dealing with skimmers.
Thank you, Adam.
Good. I'm Steve Skurlock. I'm with Independent Bankers Association of Texas. We're headquartered here in Austin. I am the financial institution, or a financial institution representative on the working group.
I'm Brad Schulke with the Texas Attorney General's Office.
And just for informational purposes, Brad Schulke, myself, and another individual who introduce himself here shortly with the Department of Agriculture, we serve as ex officio members to this work group. So just kind of give you some context as to what AG, TDLR, and TDA are doing on this work group. So thanks, Brad.
I'm Adam Thompson with Meter Calibration Solutions. We're out of DFW, Texas, obviously. We're helping with the laws on, I guess, 250 service companies and under.
Lane Worthington. I'm with WTG Fuels out of Midland, Texas. I'm here on, I guess, on the propane side.
Good afternoon, Jason Harris with Buc-ee's, and I'm here as one of the retail fuel representatives.
Thanks, Jason.
My name is Shiraz Ali. I'm an independent operator. I have 30-plus location. I'm involved on a daily basis, 30-plus year experience in convenience store, and I'm here to help and very excited to work with this group. Thank you.
I'm Carlos Garza from Edinburgh, Texas, La Lomita Inc. We have 35 sites, and we represent the group that has 100 meters or more.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Harris-Menace. I'm with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation.
My name is Wes Nance. I'm with JF Petroleum Group, formerly Petroleum Solutions Incorporated, and I'm here representing service companies with customers more than 250,000.
My name is Steve Boyd. I'm with Suncoast Resources, Inc., headquartered out of Houston with 18 offices in Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. We've got 880 vehicles representing the wholesale meter trade.
I'm Dan Hunter. I'm with the Texas Department of Agriculture.
Harry Maxey with Maxey Energy Company out of Uvalde. I represent mainly wholesalers. We do wholesaling and some retailing of fuel, motor fuels.
I'm Gary Garrison, Fred Garrison Oil Company, Plainview, Texas, in the Panhandle, representing fuel wholesalers, distributors, suppliers, gasoline, diesel.
My name is Steve Webster. I am apparently representing the financial institutions. I work for a company called WEX Incorporated, based out of Portland, Maine, offices around the world, but suffering significantly due to skimming losses in the state of Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, we've have a very illustrious group. I appreciate everyone being here. I look forward to working and kind of steering this group in the area that we can begin to start ensuring that the motor fuels industry and everything involved, I'm going to use motor fuels as kind of a broad term, a global term, as it relates to skimmers and LSCs and wholesalers, suppliers, and convenience stores. And I just hope that you indulge me with that we can begin to start improving and ensuring that this industry is strong and continues to stay strong. We want to hear what you have to say, and that's the reason we want to have this. Also know that once they find out and your industry finds out that you're on this work group, you'll get hit up a lot. Your email will be put out there, and people are going to know who you are, and they're going to want to make sure that they're channeling and funneling information through you. And so I ask that you get that information and bring it back to us so we can hear or pass it on to others that you'll meet here at TDLR to make sure that we're getting that information and that we're passing it on, that we're trying to take everything we can, all the comments, remarks, improvements, suggestions, anything they have, bring back to us so that we can make sure that we're going to be moving forward in that direction of insuring this industry. I will probably just take an executive privilege after our staff reports, just so you know. 2 weeks ago, I had a total knee replacement, so I have to get up at some times to be able to kind of move around a little bit. If not, you got to wheel me out of here. So, and no one wants to do that, so we'll take a break after our staff reports. I'm going to move on to item C, which is our public comment. If anyone is here to make a comment concerning the motor fuels industry or TDLR as a whole, feel free to do that. Our executive director is sitting right over there, Brian Francis. You can direct it to him. I'll be more than happy to take that information. But I'm going to now open it up for public comment, and we'll have that addressed for about 3 minutes if anyone's interested in saying anything to this group. Not seeing anyone, let's move on to item D, staff reports. We'll begin with licensing.
Good afternoon, group members. My name is Laura Hernandez.
Laura, if you don't mind pulling that mic closer to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, group members. My name is Laura Hernandez. I'm a manager in the licensing division. I manage the team that will be handling the applications and renewals for the fuel metering program. We have a team of 8 that will be processing the applications. Some updates for our division. We'll start processing applications and renewals on September 1, 2020. We are in the process of updating and finalizing forms. One of the notable changes I wanted to provide in this update was the naming of device types. We changed them from classes to from class 5 to low fuel, class 6 to high flow, class 7 to LPG. We will have application instructions and provide some in case everybody that's used to seeing the same kinds of device types and provide the clarifications and definitions so that there's no confusion. We have begun testing applications already, so our programmers are already on the ball getting everything into our system so that we can test it, so we'll be ready to go on September 1. And I attached a sample of statistics that we provide at advisory board groups. It's a staff report. What we do is we provide statistics for the type of license, how many new ones were processed for either the whole fiscal year or for that quarter, depending if the numbers are available. We provide the number that were done online, if that's an application or renewal that can be done online, the number that are renewed, again, online, and then the total population at the end of that quarter or that fiscal year. If there's anything that you would like to see added to it, please always let us know and we can provide that at those meetings. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
You said you were changing the classifications? from
Just
class
the
5?
naming, just the name.
So there's still going to be 3 classifications?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, repeat that again, Laura, what those 3 classes are.
They're going to be the classes, instead of class 5, we've changed the name to low flow. For class 6, it'll be high flow, and then class 7 to LPG. And they will include the definitions, and we will still have the class numbers there, just as a reminder until it gets more in place and everybody becomes more familiar with those name changes.
Did the frequency change on the recertification?
No.
Have we changed that? Is it
No.
still 5 years?
Yet we will actually, that will be actually coming, oh, Jessica, I think wants to address that.
So my name is Jessica Escobar. I'm an assistant general counsel with TDLR, and sorry about that. We can discuss that further when we talk about rules a little bit later, and we can go into more detail about what we're looking at programmatically and a little bit of the changes that we're making, and definitely we want to get your input on where we're going with the program and thoughts on timelines and things like that.
And Wes, I appreciate you asking that question. That probably is a good segue. If anyone has any questions concerning our agency, as they're coming out, feel free to ask. As questions are being brought up also, I do want to have a very free-flowing conversation once we get into kind of the rules and the questions that you just asked right now concerning the length of the license term. Those type of questions, we'll have a very, intimate conversation, if you'd like, concerning those things, so that we can ensure that all your questions are being answered, that when you walk away from here, that there's nothing left undone. Thank you. I do want to make sure and offer that to you to know.
Is there a class license for bulk rack? You said high volume, but there's the 20 to 100, and then there's 100 plus. Is that all going to be under the same class of high volume? Because you said low volume, high volume, or low flow, high flow, and then LP.
And I believe that the class 5 was the 20 with the low flow, which was a 20.
Yeah, and then
Anything
there's
above that
class
is high.
6. Then there's class 6, which right now is 20 to 100. But I was asking if there's going to be a bulk rack classification or license for an ultra high for 100 gallons or more.
I'm sorry, so for right now, what we have is, and like I said, everything is still in review and in the process of being finalized, becoming on rule, as we're going through these rules. But right now, we just have the low flow, the high flow, and then the LPG.
So as of right now, that'll assume to be fallen under the category of the high flow.
High flow, yes, sir.
Any other questions, members? Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, thank you.
Enforcement Division. We now have the Honorable Ron Foster.
Honorable.
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian Francis. Ron, before you speak.
That's $20 in it.
Well, you're chairman of this committee, Workgroup. Let's add, if we forget to, just assume it's there, but these are all proposed changes. Nothing has changed. And I know it sounded like, here's a change that we've made, here's a change that we've made. Nothing has changed. This is the starting of the process. You're going to have that dialogue in the rules. You're going to have a deeper conversation in the work group. There's been no change in how the world looks today. You're going to help us craft that. But we are giving you a starting point of what we think it should be. But as you get through the work groups, as you hear Jessica lay out the draft for the rules, you're going to hear the word draft and proposed rules. So nothing has changed, okay?
That's an excellent point. Members, just so you know, here within TDLR, we have had, I can't even say double digits, it's been triple-digit number of meetings concerning motor fuels. And so we have gone through a lot of meetings, talking about forms, talking about licensing, talking about these type of questions that we have here. So, but what we also find out, and you'll find out about TDLR, is that we're not experts in motor fuels. We're experts in licensing, but we're not experts in motor fuels, and that's what we're going to rely upon y'all. So, thank you.
May I proceed there?
Yes, you may proceed.
Good
Until
afternoon.
I interrupt you again.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Hello again. Glad you made it back. I'm Ron Foster, the Director of the Enforcement Division. I'm glad to be here to present today our division report. You should have an example of what our staff report would look like. I'm going to go through that with you. Usually we would start off, as you see, with some personnel updates, and so I'm excited to announce that we have recently promoted John Medlock to the Chief Prosecutor position. I believe he's here in the room. Wanted to be noticed wearing the red. He is an experienced prosecutor on our staff, and he leads a great team of 17 prosecutors who handle the enforcement cases and work collaboratively with colleagues throughout the agency. The attorney team handling your cases in this program currently consists of Michael Shirk, Tony Reed, and Jaime Arabia. Jaime and Tony are also present here. I would also like to recognize the promotion of Christina Kaiser, the former Director of Enforcement, to her new position as the Deputy Executive Director over Regulatory Services, which includes the Field Inspections Division, the Regulatory Program Management Division, and the Enforcement Division. Case highlights would usually be a part of this report. A case highlight is a brief summary of cases, a sampling of the cases that we've brought to final resolution. That is a final order. As we have not had any final orders yet on your program cases, there are none to summarize. Our key statistics, enforcement statistics will be provided for the program. In this case, you have them from September 1st, 2019 through January 31st, 2020. We normally provide them by fiscal quarter or fiscal year. Typically, our statistics would include a comparison to the prior fiscal year, as well as the totals for the agency as a whole. That is all of the programs combined in order to show you your slice of the pie. So here we have complaints received are around 471, cases opened are 391, cases closed 207. Please note that the cases open and cases closed do not exactly align, because as cases are open, they must work their way through our enforcement process that I described earlier, the intake, the investigations, and the prosecution. And at any given time, they are at those various stages of the process. Beneath that, you would see case outcomes, which besides the final orders that I mentioned, you would see if we had any. You may see in the statistics for the cases that were closed with insufficient evidence, cases that might have been referred to, that include cases that might have been referred to another agency, cases where warning letters were issued. We talked about that earlier in the circumstances under which maybe there would be warning letters issued. And cases which have been withdrawn by complainant. Believe it or not, sometimes that does happen when corrective actions are taken or refunds are made. Complainants will, on occasion, withdraw their complaint. The final statistics that you see are the categories of common violations. If there are more than 10, you might see a top 10 list provided. Right now, you see that we've been working through a fair number of cases involving the fuel quality and fuel quantity. In regards to, on the second page, a little brief summary of what we've done in regards to implementation of Senate Bill 2119. Members of our enforcement team have been intimately involved in the program's transition from the Department of Agriculture to TDLR. One of our best and brightest, management analyst Chris Russey, who I like to call our numbers guy, and he really likes that. He's been integral to this process and participated in outreach efforts, including the Fuel and Convenience Summits in San Antonio and Arlington, attendance at training with the Tyler PD on skimmers, and practically single-handedly developing the complaint resolution procedures for the Enforcement Division, which are specific to this program. That actually concludes my brief presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Can I just ask you one real quick? On the statistics, the informally resolved 3, what does that mean? Is that
Informally resolved. Again, sometimes the complainant and the respondent come into an agreement regarding the resolution of the matter. So I'm not really familiar with a lot of the allegations in this particular program. Like, for example, if it was air conditioning and somebody was complaining that the air conditioning was broken, but then the respondent decided to come and fix it for them, they might withdraw their complaint, and we would count that as an informally resolved matter. There was no violation, there was no penalty, there was no sanction. They basically worked it out with our help. Any other questions?
Any other questions for Ron? I would make note that Ron failed to mention that John Medlock is a fellow Texas Tech Red Raider. So for those on this esteemed board that are Red Raiders, right, Dan?
Brian writes my paycheck. Brian signs my paycheck, and I did that purposely.
Ron, thank you. That's a great segue. Brian Francis. So members, as this board starts maturing and the efforts of the agency starts maturing, you're going to have a lot of more curiosity about what's going on in enforcement. One thing that we've noted in doing the analysis and looking at what the Department of Agriculture has done, what we're receiving, I believe it was Mr. Webster had testified that there's nearly like 1 billion transactions at pumps. You have a very, very, very low violation and complaint rate. It just is. And you're going to see that. I think a question came up during Ron's presentation earlier. I think you're going to want to understand what our philosophy is and our approach. How do we feel? How do we go about doing enforcement? The key change I think you're going to see is that TDLR's enforcement structure is functionally aligned, as David talked about. There's 17 prosecutors. That's all they do. They prosecute cases for all the different programs. Brad's team with the general counsel folks are the ones like Jessica that are going to do the rules and work on the statutory things and work on the collections with our interactions with the AG's office, open records request. And so there is a separation of those activities. But Ron's team, they're professional enforcers. They do complaint resolution, and they bring a spirit of let's get folks in compliance to the approach. We're not here to put folks out of business. They could be firm, fair, and consistent when they have to, but their philosophy on resolving a complaint is resolving it and making sure that it's addressed and that it doesn't continue going forward. But this is a report that when they start having highlights of cases, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that could have been me. How did they handle that? Okay, that's a fair penalty. Oh, that's too high. Or, hey, we need to change our business practices when I get home because, these folks aren't joking up there at TDLR. You're going to have that full range of emotion as we start delving into key cases. So this report's going to become more robust and more interesting as we move down that road.
I'm sorry, Mr. Frost, we are taking no further testimony.
I don't have anything to say. I was just being prepared to respond in case my boss says something.
No.
Thanks, Ron. Our RPM division.
Hello again. Charlotte Mulder with the Regulatory Program Management Division. And I wanted to go over the one page that I provided for today as a sample report of what we will be reporting anytime that you guys meet outside of a individual work group meeting. I'm sure that we will be involved very heavily in work group meetings to decide everything that is currently pending as in draft form. But we have done quite a bit in RPM since the Senate Bill 2119 passed. And I want to start with C on the report, showing you just bulleted items of things that we've been working on. Attending trainings for skimmers, setting up the entire skimmer report system that I mentioned earlier today, working closely with enforcement, Chris Ressi, and setting up processes, procedures, inventory, transfer, storage of equipment, working with MOU or on MOUs with TxDOT to try to store vehicles and equipment, trying to get an MOU with TCEQ for certain things, researching other states' processes and procedures, and trying to get everything kind of coordinated. And that was one of the things that led to trying to get rid of classes and codes and making it all confusing, in our opinion, because it was almost like you have to learn a code, and so we wanted to use words to make it clearer to people what we were talking about. Not that that was a bad thing, just because we just didn't understand what it was. So we're trying to transition to words, at least that's what we're looking at. On the personnel updates, going back up to A, we have Tim Foskey, who is in the audience today. He was our first hire to set up the skimmer response team in our division. They are also not just doing skimmers, they're also doing fuel quantity, helping out enforcement with those. And then we also hired Stuart Stranad, who's over here in the audience as well. And yes, sorry, I have to say it right. And they have a team of folks that we went around and interviewed and hired, and they are placed throughout the state. And I'm going to list them: Jonathan Rogers, Billy Horde, Timothy Morales, Juan Zarate, Matthew Williams, and Richard Bolton, all throughout the state, who are the ones who hop to anytime something needs to be handled. And then we also have, and so, by the way, Stuart is the manager over that entire section. He does more than just motor fuels. He will be working with several different programs that we have here at TDLR. As far as statistics go, since we have assisted enforcement with at least 80 complaints that have come in, gone out and done the fuel quantity sampling for them, and quality assisting training. And then we have had 23 skimmer complaints come in since January 22nd, when we put the skimmer complaint system in place. And we've gone out on those investigations. So that is actually my report for this section of the meeting. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Charlotte?
I got a quick question.
Yes.
Have there been any convictions of these skimmers?
We do not handle that. We just go out and do it, and then we hand it off to the pre-fusion center, calling it the pre-fusion center until it's all up and running. But when we have a report, whether we find one or not, we hand it off to law enforcement, and we're done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you.
I would make note also, you notice under the personnel updates that there's a lot from TDA. We thought all the great employees were at TDLR. Come to find out that they're sprinkled out through other agencies. And we went out and we found some of the great employees over at TDA, and we're fortunate to bring them over. Sorry about that, Dan, but we did, and they're here now. And so I would probably put all the other state agencies on notice. Be careful, we're going to start coming after your great employees now also. So let's move on to the executive office. I'm going to turn it over to our illustrious executive director, but at the same time, if Tanya and Lisa would come up, they're going to kind of give a briefing on where we're at with the licensing system.
Perfect. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak again. Board members, it's great to have you here. Mike's absolutely right about the hiring that we've done. Every organization needs talent and good talent. We have arrived at this level at TDLR is because we identify folks that have that knowledge from the different programs, whether it's cosmetology. Trey, who's the director of our customer service division, was a frontline employee for the Cosmetology Commission when we brought him over, and he's risen up through the ranks in our organization. He understood how they did business. He believed in our culture and our vision and how we operate. It was a perfect fit for our organization, and we do that throughout the process. It's great having Tim and Stuart on board. Jessica, they've added value immediately, and their roles are going to be expansive. They're not just going to be working in these areas. The first thing I'd like to talk about is strategic planning. Every 2 years, state agencies are required to undergo the strategic planning process. We received our instructions from the Governor's Office and the Legislative Budget Board. Legislative Budget Board is a legislative construct made of Senate appointees and House member appointees. That strategic planning process is important to TDLR. It's vital to how successful we are as an organization. It sets the standard for our vision, our mission, the approach that we take. TDLR goes in. I mean, we go all in doing strategic planning. We will be going around to at least 5 cities around the state of Texas, inviting our licensees in those locations to come out and tell us what do we do well, what can we do better. If you're king or queen for a day, what's one change you would make in a law, a rule, a process, or the way that we do business? And then what changes do you see happening in your industry over the next 5 years that's going to impact the way we need to regulate that industry? We were able to do a mini strategic planning session at the first TFFA meeting that we attended in September. We got fantastic information. We shared that information again just a couple weeks ago. That's who we are as an agency. We do not run away from the dissonance, and you've heard my team say that a lot. We want to hear the things we're not doing well, because we can only improve as an organization if we get that feedback. That's what that strategic planning process is about. We're also going to conduct our first ever online, 100% online town meeting. So no one's going to be standing in this room but little old me talking to a board of information that's coming from phone numbers and phone calls and shooting in their data, and we're going to have this online town meeting. We have no clue how it's going to work, but I'm excited to kind of stumble our way through something that's going to be, I think, necessary as we move forward. Texas is not going to get smaller in terms of population. We have to figure out how to expand our reach and also how to manage the data that comes in with that process. Strategic plan is due on June 1st. We'll take it to our commission in the latter part of May for their final approval. That plan will be published on our webpage. Every comment that we receive in the process, unless there's profanity in there, and we always edit that out. But every comment that we receive will be placed on our website. So, you know, Carlos, if you don't make the meeting in Arlington, you're going to know what they said. If you don't send an email, that email that we get the information from, you're going to have that data too. It's transparent. It's your information. So you're going to be able to see the full range of what we have. At the end of the day, our plan will include strategic initiatives, those things that require a statutory change that we think can make the world better for us, for our licensees, and for Texans. Those things that remove impediments in the way that we do business will be in that plan. If it's not in the plan, it doesn't mean we're not going to do it. There are some things that we can just make changes on in our rules moving forward. We don't have to publish it in our plan. We just get to work on that process. So strategic planning is something that's important. TDLR, you can go to our webpage now. You can look at the past strategic plans. In each of those plans, you'll see our report card from the previous one to let you know what you told us, what we told you we were going to do, and what we did, because we think accountability is important in this process. So we are extending an invitation now, and you'll get an invitation if you're on our listserv. So get on our listserv. That's a plug for it. Get on our listserv so we can invite you to come out and talk to us as we move forward throughout the state, not just with this motor fuel program, but you may have a friend in your family that's a podiatrist or somebody that deals with the water well driller program. All those comments are welcome in this process. So I'll turn over to Christina Kaiser to touch a little bit on Sunset.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Christina Kaiser. I'm a Deputy Executive Director here at TDLR. My area is Regulatory Affairs. And I would like to tell you a little bit about the Sunset Review process. The Sunset Commission is an actual agency of the state of Texas. The commission proper is made up of appointed members of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then there is an actual agency with staff. And their responsibility is to review all of the agencies of the state of Texas on a periodic basis and make recommendations about, first of all, and most important, should that agency continue to exist? And if the answer to that is yes, then make recommendations about possible statutory or process type changes at the agency that would improve the agency's processes and improve the agency's service to the state of Texas. So TDLR is under review by the Sunset Commission right now. The review began in
October 8th.
October.
Not that I'm keeping track.
Yeah, he's very precise with it. It began in October of last year, and it has involved a large number, I want to say 50-ish individual meetings with Sunset staff members coming over to TDLR and meeting with large or small groups of TDLR staff to delve into our processes and the laws that we administer and anything that has to do with the functions of the agency. The review is still in the public, or I'm sorry, the private part of the process right now, so that all intake that Sunset collects at this juncture is confidential. The Sunset Review is covering a select group of programs, what we consider TDLR's legacy programs or the older programs. So it doesn't strictly cover your program in particular. However, if you have comments to make about TDLR, I know the Sunset Commission staff would be happy to hear them. There is a place on the Sunset Commission's website where you can go and offer comments that at this time are confidential. So what happens after the Sunset staff finishes meeting with the agency staff, they come out with a report of their findings, the staff report, the staff's findings. And that will, first, it'll address, the million-dollar question, should TDLR continue to exist? And then it will typically include recommendations for statute changes, not only to TDLR's organic statute, but also to the statutes for the 39 programs that we're responsible for administering. And it would also include, typically, recommended management changes. These are things that don't require a change in law. It's just a recommendation to change a process, or maybe to change a policy that TDLR is administering. So that report from the Sunset staff is expected late May or early June. What happens next is in August there will be a public hearing before the full Sunset Commission, the actual appointed members from the House and the Senate. And at that, there will be an opportunity for public testimony about TDLR. It's going to be a 2-day meeting, actually, August 19th and 20th, because TDLR has so many programs. So people are able to come to that meeting and offer public testimony. TDLR will probably also have the obligation of offering some testimony at that hearing. After the public hearing is complete, then there's another meeting of the Sunset Commission in September. That's the decision meeting, where the Sunset Commission, having seen the staff's recommendations and then having heard all the public testimony, will actually come out with their recommendations for the conclusion of the Sunset Review of TDLR. And as I mentioned before, typically their decision is going to include statutory changes. It's also going to include recommendations for management action type changes. So the statute recommendations that come out of that will, of course, be carried forward into the next legislative session, and we will see a bill that gets filed, or maybe more than one bill, that sort of contains the Sunset Commission's statutory change recommendations, and hopefully that will move apace through the process and actually get passed. We have seen in some instances that hasn't happened in previous sessions with other agencies. But in the meantime, of course, TDLR can get to work with the management actions. And I hope the boss doesn't mind me speaking for him. This is a scary process for a lot of agencies. I mean, it's scary for us in some ways, but it's also, we very much welcome this outside view of our processes. TDLR is very self-critical, and because we have such a track record of taking on new programs at pretty much every legislative session since I've been here, every 2 years, we kind of have to reevaluate everything and look at our current processes and see how we can fold in the new programs that we're taking on to accommodate their unique characteristics. So we are very self-critical, but it's us looking at us. And so an outside set of eyes that isn't, full of our, fabulousness is welcome to us. So we look forward to seeing what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And she's absolutely right. The wonderful challenge that Sunset presents is that we're going to be better. We're going to be a better organization at the end of this process. TDLR, because we love to be unique and different, we're actually going to undergo Sunset twice, 2 times in a row. We'll be the only agency on the record to do that. Woohoo! And Christina appropriately broke it down that the 24 legacy programs are under this Sunset review. The motor fuels program will go under the next cycle, specifically the motor fuel statute and those elements. Basically, programs that were transferred to us after September 1, 2016 will go into that second phase. But everything we do as an organization, our commission structure, our advisory board structure, how the agency operates in terms of its executive level, that's for discussion and it's open now. Under the same sunset cycle, TDA is also going through sunset, so there's a lot of big moving parts that are taking place, but it's exciting time for us. Quick overview of Senate Bill 2119. If you didn't realize, the bill passed and it got signed, so here we are at this moment. Some of the changes that I'd like to put in front of you, you may have already noticed, is that it recognizes our statutory structure versus the difference in TDA's statutory structure. They have a commissioner, we have a commission. So when you look at TDLR's hierarchy, it's the governor, it's the 7 commissioners. Yes, I have 7 bosses. They're wonderful people. I have 7 bosses. You have the advisory board structure that provides us that technical support, and then you have our functional alignment, the divisions that you met today. That's underneath it. So you got governor, you have commission, you have executive director, you have the agency. You're going to see those terms in different ways in your rules. You're going to see commission. That's the 7 members. You're going to see the department. That's me and our agency acting. You're going to see executive director. That's me specifically acting. For example, the appointment of the work group was an executive director action. I made the appointments. Typically, that's reserved for our commission. So those words mean something. When you see that in the rules, pay attention. Commission, that's going to be a formal meeting, and it's going to be an action of that body. There's going to be a meeting. They're going to have it on the agenda. They're going to take a vote on that. Department, it may just be Ron's group. That's the department shall open a complaint. The department shall respond to a complaint. The department shall issue a license. The department may reject a license. That's us and the staff level doing it. The executive director may. The executive director shall. So take note to that when you see that difference in it. Item D, implementation activities and accomplishments. Tila, start warming up, because I definitely want to bring you up here briefly to talk about the sticker release that we did in January. So start getting your brain churning on that. I'll start with presentations that we've done. We've had an opportunity to, and we are available to go to any and all association meetings. TFFA has reached out to us, so we went there in September, I believe, and then just a couple of weeks ago to their meeting. And it's a great opportunity to meet the folks that are going to be touched by our regulation directly. There's nothing better than having somebody, when you walk up the stage, grab you and say, so what are you going to do? And who are you again? And you have this conversation. My team knows that it's about relationship building. When people know who you are and what you stand for, you have a better opportunity of building this rapport and this connection. You have a better opportunity of being effective in how you regulate. We will, I promise you, we will do something you don't like. We're going to do it. And sometimes it's going to be on purpose because we believe that that's the direction we should go in. Sometimes it's going to be because we made a mistake. And when we make those mistakes, when you have a relationship, we get the grace that comes with, they just didn't know any better. And we'll tell you, hey, we screwed up on that one. We should not have put that rule in place We shouldn't have cut the bulk thing in half and turned it into a meter that flows high. That's me being a poet, right? We're going to make mistakes, but the relationships that we build now, started this morning, started at those conferences, that's going to allow us to navigate those moments when we have very difficult decisions that we have to make and go forward with. That's why you're here. That's why we're here as an agency. I, again, will invite you out to the strategic planning process. If you can't make it to a meeting, send your information online. If you can't send it online, call in when we do that town meeting that's electronic. But if we don't hear from you, we won't know. We won't be able to provide you. And that's talking to the folks that are listening in. This agency is open for business, and we're open to hear your comments to allow us to be a smarter agency as we move forward. Mike, I'll let you turn over to your group at the table, and then we'll bring Tila up, okay?
And along that same line, strategic planning is a very important process. It's a very important piece of who we are here at TDLR. I was talking to Brian earlier is that I attended a meeting a few weeks ago where a state demographer stated this. They said by the year 2050, Texas will be at about 46 million population. Give you some idea, we're currently at 23. So in 30 years, they're projecting that the state of Texas will double in population size. So that being the case, I think that's the reason it's imperative that we receive information and how we structure our rules, how we structure statute to ensure that we are continuing to stay open for business and that we are welcoming and bringing more individuals into the state of Texas. Because it's going to happen. That trend is already happening. And so you begin to start looking at it from that angle, you're sitting there going, wow, that's quite a bit. 30 years we will double, 46 million population. And as they pointed out, there is a triangle between Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. That approximately 80% of the population will reside in that triangle. So all that to say, by the year 2050, we need to get out and move back to West Texas, which is where I'm from, Gary. I'm actually from the Lubbock area, just kind of so you know. We'll talk about that later. So what I do want to do right now, I've got Tanya and Lisa up here. They're up in our IT division. They're going to kind of give you an update as to where we're at in the licensing system and kind of let you know where we're at and kind of probably some of the challenges we've had and some of the, because this is new to us also, but some of the things that we've had to go through and where we're at. So I'm going to go and turn it over to Tanya and to Lisa.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Tanya Scarab, and this is Lisa Mendoza-Lopez, and we are in the Software Development and Support Services in IT, and I'm here representing Jody Ashlock, who is our CIO, and I'm going to keep it brief, and I'm going to just focus on what you guys want to hear as far as what we have done so far. I want to let you know that we are developing in stages. So we are on the suppliers. We have completed 90% of the coding. The forms are 100%. Online is 80%. Distributors, 90%. Forms, 100%. Online is 80%. I do have asterisks on both of those because we are waiting on a decision from execs on fees.
That's Brian.
I'm sorry.
Executive director, is that what you meant, executive director?
Yes, sir. On those two, before we can move forward. We cannot move forward on those two anymore as far as we can go. The next one is related to the licensing, the LSCs, and we're 20% on coding, 50% on the forms, 0% on online. We have an asterisk on this one because we are waiting for language from licensing. LSTs, we are 20% on the coding, 50% on the forms. There's nothing, online is not applicable for this one. I have an asterisk on that one. And we have a question for our executive director related to fees for endorsement. And then the fifth one, that I said we were doing in stages. The fifth stage is the devices, or I should say that are the devices. We are 5% on the coding, meaning we have gotten the screen mock-ups. And the forms were about 40% and 0% for online. And we have an overall question for executive director.
Dan's freaking out. He's like, wow, they get to call the executive director out in public meetings? Oh, yeah. It's a free-for-all, baby. It's a free-for-all.
Well,
It's the culture I created.
This is not a surprise to anyone. Anyway, so we have a question about whether or not we're going to absorb or charge for the convenience fees and subscription and/or subscription fees for the device.
Pondering on it.
So that's where we're at. We're kind of ready for some decisions so we can make our next steps.
I would also make note that there'll be no decisions made today. So
We know. We know, we're going as far and fast as we can. We have approved comp time. My folks are working as fast and furiously as they possibly can. But please know when we do make changes to rules, it affects our coding, and that will impact our deadline. Our 9/1.
Tanya, we appreciate it. You guys have really been doing a great job. We were talking with Dan earlier and moving as fast as we can, but we want to get it right. We want to make sure that we get it right. Will this painting have some adjustments? Yes, it will. We don't have to make all the adjustments today. But when we get this program up and running, don't freak out, Tanya and Lisa, we're going to have changes in 9 months because we're going to be smarter in 9 months on how this program operates. If we use this group correctly, we're going to improve the process. I want the group to know that nothing's going to be set in stone when we get it up there and running. We're going to make sure that we are intelligent and we're smart and we're strategic in how we move forward. I'll try to get you guys some answers pretty soon.
So
Thank you.
Recognizing you are waiting for quite a bit of information from your executive officer, what is your time frame or deadline?
Oh, we have to have it up and running by 9/1, no later than. I mean, so we're trying to have it ready for testing and security and accessibility all well before 9/1.
Do you plan to roll out in stages or wait until everything's finished?
So we're still working on that. It depends on what decisions we get and what we're able to do. But I do want to say thank you, Dan. You have been incredibly helpful in getting the information that we needed, so thank you.
Dan is he's got some biblical skills. He has parted some seas for us.
And walk on water,
Have
too.
been amazing.
Thank you.
And Mike is heading up our motor fuels efforts, and he's got some definitive timelines, and we'll get some stuff to y'all. But we wanted y'all to know where we are in the process, and that we've got multiple teams working on it.
Any questions for Tanya? Tanya is kind of the project manager in the IT area, kind of making sure everything's kind of being herded together. Lisa is heading up the IT, the actually development of the code. So if you have specific questions on coding, she could probably answer them. So.
And we'll make it in layman's terms.
I'll yield my time.
Appreciate you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I like that. As Tila's coming up, I do want to, again, take a little personal privilege here. It was mentioned earlier about Dan. When this first thing was created, there was a group set up by TDLR and by TDA that came together, and we worked out and hammered out an agreement that we called an interagency contract. And through that several discussions that we had that were at times spirited, we managed to be able to forge a great relationship, Dan and I did. And it's because of Dan that we've managed to be able to get a lot of things done and moving in his agencies, because Dan has either said, let it be done, or he has gone through there and taken the logjam out of the way to make sure that we get the information. I mean, we're talking from database layouts for us, to questions answered for stickers, for questions answered on licensing, fees, monies being transferred back and forth. Dan has been he's been our champion over at TDA, and I didn't want for this meeting to go by without you knowing that had it not been for Dan, we would not be as far along as we are at this point in time right now. So Dan, I do want you to know personally, I appreciate all the work that you've done over at TDA and working with TDLR.
Well, and I'll say this, it's not a one-person effort. We've got a lot of good people up there that are trying to make this work, and I don't have enough money in my pocket to pay you for the kind comments.
So, and he's right, they do have a lot of great employees over there, and just, again, we're poaching still, so just so you know. Tila.
on that note, my name is Tila Mange. I'm the Public Information Officer for TDLR. My team is the one that was responsible for the design of the new consumer information sticker, which I hope y'all like, and the rollout that we did back on January 7th. We had a rollout in 4 different cities at roughly the same time, which is something that our agency has never done before, and thank goodness it worked. We had 3 events that started at 10 a.m., one in Houston that had Senator Alvarado and Representative Perez. Buc-ee's was kind enough to host us for that. I messed up on ordering the weather. It was really cold and windy, but it went off really well. Then in Euless, we were at the Quick Trip and had TDLR employees as well as a professor from the Cyber Forensics Lab at the University of North Texas talking about our Protect the Pump program. And in Tyler, we were hosted at Fresh by Brookshires, and we had the criminal district attorney for Smith County and the Tyler police chief there to help us kick things off. And in Austin, in the afternoon, we got Brian in the car in Houston and hustled him back to Austin, where he was able to talk with Representative Goldman and our friends from the Texas Food and Fuels Association at the HEB at Riverside and Pleasant Valley Road. We had more than 45 stories statewide about the new stickers. We occasionally still are finding new stories that are popping up in our feed. One of the things that I think Brian was really pleased with about the sticker is that it has the information about the taxes that you pay. It also has information reminding consumers that we all play a part in making sure that fraud is stopped at the pump, reminding them to protect the pump by looking at the pump. Does it seem like there's, something going on, or if you see something and you think that's not right, to let the station know, to call TDLR, to notify local law enforcement. We think that it's a good message to remind everybody that you have to take responsibility for your own safety. And also, we had a message on there to drive friendly, resurrecting a TxDOT slogan from my youth, and they were kind enough to let us borrow that. Really appreciate everything that everybody's done to help us get the word out about the new stickers. We've sold about 24,000 at this point. We still have a ways to go. I think one of the things that will be discussed today in the rules is when you have to have the stickers up. If you need to order them, you can order them online. You can also order them through the mail. They're $1 a piece, and they look really cool. They're tamper resistant, and they're beautiful. I will just say it, they're beautiful. If you have any questions about the stickers or anything, let me know. Want to remind everybody, though, that when you're putting the new sticker on, you should take the old one off. You laugh, but we have been finding some folks that have either just given up all hope of life and have just died inside and put the sticker on top of the old one without taking it off, or thinking, well, I have room on the pump, and so I'll leave the old one and the new one. It's kind of a problem, so use the new sticker. Take the old ones off.
Any questions for Tila? Has everyone had an opportunity to be able to see our new stickers? So if you haven't, what we may do when we come back from break, we'll make sure, let's have it up on the screen just so they can see.
Any suggestions for easily removing those old stickers? Sid puts pretty good glue on the back.
Well, we have pretty good glue too. What I found worked was a razor blade. You can get those ones that are kind of U-shaped and that's got the protective, and you kind of at one side and kind of worry at it. You can also kind of stick some WD-40 I know that Jason's guys at the Buc-ee's and Katy actually had to go through there a couple weeks ago, and all of their pumps there have the new one on there. They have a guy who's really good at taking them off. You just have to be really careful if you're going to use the razor blade, not to put gashes in your plastic. But Sharpies work really good at covering that up. Just not that I know. Anything else?
Tilly, you did a great job. Doug Van Pelt was the designer of it. Having everybody involved was important, but the way you orchestrated and made it happen, it was the most competent and most effective rollout that we've ever had at a campaign at TDLR. So I just wanted to thank you for that publicly.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
All right. Members, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is to move on to item F, which is discussion of an appointment of members to the following advisory groups. After we do that, we will take a break, and then we'll move back up into the rules so we can have spend a little bit of time on discussion of the rules. Right now, Karen Berriman is passing out a list of the advisory groups, and what we've done is we've taken the liberty to do kind of appointments of the groups, and you'll find your name within those, and you'll notice that we've broken it out into an enforcement group, licensing and registration group, inspection, calibration, and standards group, rules advisory group, and then a skimmer group. What we've done is we've kind of have looked at your background to see where you're at, and then also have taken that into consideration when we begin to start doing this list of appointments. We hope that this finds be satisfactory with you. I would, of course, offer and open up in the event that there is a group that you're not on, that you believe that you could provide a lot of insight, to let me know, and we'll see what we can do about trying to get you on there. We do have other individuals that are not on this advisory work group in the panel that you see before you right now that want to be on some of these groups. So we're going to have some additional members, I think, that will be able to help that from the public, from the industry. They'll be able to provide additional information for us so that we can also be able to take their input also. At this point in time, what I'd like to do is to let you know, if you've got any questions, any comments concerning these groups, I would open it up right now for you to be able to let us know.
And Mike, as they're pondering that, Brian Francis, I think Mike already pointed out, but the asterisks represent the folks that would be chairing or leading those particular work groups. The other thing is, keep in mind, go back to Mr. Gladney's presentation about the walking quorums. There's a reason why these work groups have the specific numbers that they have. That's below the quorum. And I'll just grab Terry as an example. You know, Terry, you're on the work group and you're cranking out stuff on enforcement, and you're loving the conversation, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to let Carlos know what we've been talking about on enforcement. You've just now added a sixth person to the conversation for enforcement. So when you are on a work group, you are discreetly only talking about those issues with the folks in that work group. As you spill over, and it gets a little goofy, but as you spill over and have those conversations with someone else who wasn't on the work group that's here, then it starts moving that quorum. So be very, very mindful about it. There's a reason why we have the numbers we have and who we have on those groups. But I'll turn it back over to the chairman.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm glad that Brian mentioned that. Just be cognizant of that and know that happens. I would let you know also that, actually I lost my train of thought. Oh, I'm sorry. The work groups will primarily be conference calls. Don't feel like that we're going to bring you back into Austin for a meeting. We will have those through conference calls. We'll set up a conference call and set up a time for you to be able to call in to be able to have that discussion. So there'll be a lot of emails going back and forth between our staff members. You notice that there are staff members assigned to each one of them. As an example, in the Enforcement Advisory Group, Chris Russey will be the point person from staff. You might just let everybody know who you are, Chris. Licensing and registration will be Laura Hernandez, who, of course, was up here earlier. Inspections, calibration, and standards, of course, would be Stuart Stranad. I want to make sure I say that right. Rules advisory, of course, will be Jessica Escobar. And then on the skimmer group will be Tim Foskey, who's, of course, out there also in the audience. So they're going to be kind of heading up those groups from a staff point. But know that when I say that they're heading up the group from the staff standpoint, you will probably, on your call, if you're on a call with Tim, you may hear Stuart in the background also. You may hear Jessica in the background. You may hear me in the background. But we've assigned it to a particular staff person here to be able to ensure that they're organizing and bringing these meetings together. So that's basically what we've done. There will be a litany of TDR folks also involved in those calls. So, because we want to make sure that we're hearing and getting everything that you're asking for. Members, any discussion on these work groups? It's kind of like a marriage ceremony. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Mike,
Mike.
I'm sorry with that, and I'm Steve Skurlock,
Sure.
representing the financial institutions who knows very little, if anything, about calibration, inspection, and the rest of it. If you want, someone who knows very little about that to look at it and determine if that's something that, if I can have some positive feedback, I'm happy to help do whatever and delighted to be on this group, but you tell me, and I can ask offline, but everything, Brian, is open here, so I want to make sure that, as the first question asker, that we're being open. So I'm not questioning the assignments, but I, am not have not been asked to be on the coronavirus, antidote committee either, and that's about how much I know about calibration, inspection, and maintenance of fuel. I'm a customer of most of these people, for whatever it's worth, and appreciate all of them.
Steve, that's a great point. So the 6 points of separation that could be an area where you add value is that you're not going to detect a skimmer without knowing how the inspection process works.
Thank you.
You have to be able to get in. The LSCs and the LSTs are the ones that are going to open up the device and look inside of it. This is part of the continuum of, what the impact is financially if a skimmer is found. This is the part where the skimmer is found.
Indeed.
And getting you there. So it could give you that context. That's the thought process. Wrestle with it, and we can move back and forth, because there may be someone else that says, you know what, I'd rather be on there, and maybe I could add different value and perspective.
And if that is part of it, that's great, Brian, and that sounds perfect. That obviously is an important part of it. So I will be a specialist on that
That's
particular
right.
issue.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Wes.
I was looking through the list, and I was one of the things that I was most excited about being on this board was to help with the skimmers, and I'm not on that one, so I'd like to see if there's room. I'd like to be on that one as well. The last one.
Okay. We'll take it under advisement. Thank you, Wes.
Decision to make, I guess.
Anyone else?
This is Jason Harris. I kind of feel the same about the rules advisory group. I had some interest in that, reading through the descriptions.
Okay. Take that under advisement. Thank you, Jason. I would make note for those that are here, you will know that's the absence of Brad Schulke with the AG's office, myself, and Dan Hunter with TDA. We are not assigned to any of these work groups. As I mentioned earlier, we serve as ex officio members to this work group, and so that's the reason that you're not seeing us assigned to any of these. Not that we're trying to shirk work, any type of work. Yes, sir.
Even though we've been assigned these general groups, we'll have opportunities to have input into all of them at some point.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, this is just
dividing
dividing the
Great
work.
point.
We're not excluded from the rest of it.
That's a great point, yes. What will happen is that the next meeting that we have, which we'll talk about that here in a bit, but the next meeting we'll have will be a report coming back from each one of these work groups where we'll have the opportunity to be able to discuss and be able to kick out and talk about everything that the work group went through. So, yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Garrison, is that everyone on this work group will have the opportunity to be able to have their say-so in each one of these areas.
Because I've got an opinion on every bit of it.
It's probably fair to say that the workload on these will kind of ebb and flow just depending on what's going on.
That's exactly
Rules, I
correct.
would expect to be a lot of workload up front.
Right, that's a great point. One of the things that you'll find out is that in the rules, we're probably looking at the first discussion of rules, of some type of a conference call, to probably occur probably next week sometime. That's what we're looking at. So, yes, you're right, there'll be an ebb and flow of all of this, but the rules will be the first one that kicks off because we've got to get that in place in order for a couple of things, one, which Jessica will talk about, but one of them, we have to get over to the governor's office for their review and then publish them out, but it's got to come back to this group before our next meeting. So you're exactly correct.
And Jason, Brian Francis, to kind of give you that ebb and flow pretty much coming out the blocks. I'm a track and field man. I know I look like a shot putter now, but I was lean, baby. I was lean.
The guard.
The enforcement work group, their first task will be criminal convictions, and then they're going to take a long break until the rules are in place, and then they'll start working on the penalty matrix. Once the rules are in place, now they can start doing the matrix. So that work is going to be a burst and then a break. When you look at the licensing and registration, that group's going to have a lot of work. But they're also going to be working on the license and registration process and rules. So that body of rules will belong to them. The inspection calibration standards team is going to be working forever. They're just going to be working forever. I mean, there's so much that we want to learn, we want to discover in that process. We're going to be running parallel, with the AG because there'll be a little bit of touch and nexus for that group. That group's going to be always working. They're always going to be working. The rules group is going to work, but I see their work being more cerebral and strategic after we've got this thing up and running. When you start looking at those best practices in other states, we know that y'all operate in different locations. That's exciting to us. It's exciting to see, are they doing the combo fuel? Are they doing multiple devices? How are they funding that? How are they pricing that? How are they inspecting that? We want to get that information, but that's not going to impact directly this first round of rules. It's going to be more that long-term thinking of it. And the skimmers, we're rocking and rolling with the AG's office. As we get information and guidance from them, that's going to come into this work group. That work group is going to be our avenue and our vehicle by which to say, AG, this is what you said, and we're going to do it, but y'all may want to think about this. We've got some industry experts that says that this could be a better way or an opportunity to improve it. So I see it being, what does the AG want us to do and how they're going to do it on skimmers, and us being a forum that provides information back to them saying how it could be tweaked and moved. So that one ebb and flows directly. So inspections, working all day long, licensing registration, working all day long, rules being more of a down the road perspective. Jess will pull you in on the rules, the overall structure. But even in that one, when she does her presentation, she can't say, well, the licensing group said X, because now she's walked you into a walking quorum. So we're going to be mindful that we're not going to take you down that road unless we don't like you. And then, I'm joking about that. I was joking, Brad. Brad's like, Brian, tell your sense of humor is not always good. So I wanted to give you a context of how they'll work and what you can expect from them.
And I would let you know, Jason, that I now resent the fact that you said ebb and flow, because I think Brian said it like 6 times right now.
I'm speaking his language, huh?
I was going to go 7, but Texas Tech stops at 6 on their number count, so I didn't want to go higher.
The license and regulation group, is that going to be part of the coding of the meters and how you identify? That's going to fall into that. I wouldn't mind being part of that group. That's kind of what we discussed when I first met with y'all.
Okay.
Overall, that.
And I would also make a note that if you're on these work groups and you look at it and you'll say, yeah, I'm really not too interested, so I'll go ahead and leave and let Adam step in there. Or let Wes step in there, or let someone else step in there. Let us know. We can move these things around. This is just a draft form. We were hoping that by presenting this to you that you'd have the opportunity to already have an appointment already made, as opposed to me going through and saying, no one's volunteered for this, so I'm going to volunteer you now. So that's the reason that we kind of brought this out right now so that you have. Yes, sir.
In the interest of building relationships, I know a lot of this will be done over the phone, emails in the future. could we, I don't know these, I know you rattled off who some of these staff members are, but maybe during a break or something, maybe they could like put their names on their foreheads or something, just so I could meet them. Because if I'm gonna have conversations over the phone, I'd like to know who it's with, because I assume that their goal is to keep these things regimented, moving along and focused.
Well, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have 5-folder tabs. I'd like for all staff to get one and put it on their head. And then walk around that way, just like the old days of football when our coach used to put our names on the helmet so he know he was yelling at. So, yeah, we'll do that.
That would help.
Yeah.
Thank
If
you
you don't
very
mind, staff, again, if you're on one of the appointments as a staff liaison, make sure you come up and introduce yourself to everyone that's here. So, all right. Anything else? Speak now or? All right. It's actually 2:45. If you don't mind, let's take about a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and we're going to tackle the rules. I guess if we don't get your picture, Adam, you could probably go through the mug shots and see if you can find some of these.
Welcome one. You gotta click right here. Type in welcome
Okay.
with the capital.
Hopefully there's no reset.
It is now 3:05. I appreciate everybody actually keeping it to about 20 minutes. Kind of that old saying in West Wing, I want to keep our 15 minutes closer to 30 and not 45. So we did pretty good on that. We're now going to have Jessica Escobar, who's going to come up. I would make note she's a former TDA employee.
I am. All right, so hi everybody and welcome. Very excited about this today. So I will be talking to you. Sorry, so awkward. Sorry. Okay, right-handed. So I will be talking to you about the rules. You should have a draft of the rules in your binders, and it looks like this. The top of it says TDL Proposed Rules 16 TAC Chapter 97. Just so you know what we're talking about for right now.
If you scroll down to actually 8 on your PDF is where you'll find it.
Oh, right. You guys have iPads. Sorry
Should be
about that.
page 8.
So before we start talking about the rules, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background. These rules have been a long time coming. You've got a lot of people that have worked on these rules. We've had many meetings to talk about these from a lot of folks within the agency. So all of the divisions that are at TDLR have worked together to provide input on these rules, because we've got everything from licensing to enforcement has provided input, and of course our RPM has contributed, and we've even had finance and everything. So we're all working together to put these rules together. So one of the big things that we look at is what's in the rules, right? So we have taken these rules down by over 3,000 words, and you heard Brian talk about that earlier. What's happening when we do that? Well, what's in the rules? Is it something that has to be there? Does it need to be there? Or is it just there for fluff? So one of the things that we look at when we're reviewing rules that have come over from another agency is it a statutory requirement? Does it contribute to the program? Is it there because it has a consumer protection need? And is it something that is, or is it something that's just kind of because that's the way it was? So that's one of the things that we looked at. One of the other things that I did when looking at the rules was we live by plain talk here at TDLR, and we want to make sure that these rules are easy to read. You shouldn't need somebody that is a lawyer. You shouldn't need to sit there and read the rules for a really long time to try and understand what they mean. So we went through and made sure that these rules were easy to read and understand. So with that, we lost about 3,000 words just in doing that. However, we still maintained exactly what we needed from the statute, and we brought the substance of what was previously at TDA over to TDLR. But that means we brought what was in the statute. So when Senate Bill 2119 passed, it brought most of what was in the Agriculture Code over to TDLR. So some of the laws were changed, and with that in mind, we did make changes. So you'll see some of that, and we can discuss it high level, but you will see some of that in the rules, so some things are different. But for the most part, everything did stay the same. So in looking at the rules, the way we laid these out was we did things in subchapters. Before at TDA, there were 2 different chapters. You had one chapter for fuel quality, and one chapter was for weights and measures. And then within weights and measures, you had chapters for subchapters for devices. You had one for service tax, one for companies. So everything was all over the place. So now we have everything within one chapter, and then we try to break it up so it's very logical, so you can find everything where you need it. So that's the way we broke it up into subchapters. So everything for your devices in one subchapter. We've got your motor fuel delivery and quality there in one chapter. And then we have companies and techs in one chapter, and then fees. And that's just kind of the logical flow of the way we keep most of our rules here at TDLR. So we try to keep everything unified. You'll notice that within each of the rules, there will be a note. So those are notes that I added for your information. So you'll know, have a little bit of background. Why was this rule there? Is this something that pre-existed? Is this something that is a new requirement, or is this a combination? So you may be wondering, where did this rule come from? So for example, on the definition section, you've got a really long note. So it basically lays out where everything came from. So some of it is statutory. Some of it is a combination of multiple sections. So you had a definition section there within the fuel quality chapter, and you also had one within the weights and measures chapter. Those were combined. I also broke it down a little further and said, hey, these are some of the things we did. We added new terms, we amended some terms, and we just decided not to include some of the terms. So that's kind of some background as to what those notes mean and what they did. It also explains some of the rationale behind some of the changes. So a little bit of information if you're going along and reading these before your next meeting, or just wanted some information on that. You'll see we maintained the fundamentals of the program, though. So we still maintained the NIST. We will be following NIST. That is a requirement for us to adopt some standards. We will be following NIST and ASTM. So we did adopt that within the rules. That is proposed, and we feel like that's an important thing that we will continue doing. The terms are still there. Common terms. We did briefly talk earlier about proposals to change things. High flow, low flow, basically using terminology that's kind of easier to use. Those things are, of course, up for discussion, and those are things that we can discuss a little bit now, but also that our Rules Committee can discuss later. With that said, if you're not on the Rules Committee and you have input regarding the rules, by all means, please email me, and we'll definitely look at it and take your input from there. I think that's probably it, I think, for now. We can go from there. Brian, do you have anything to add?
I think I'd like to have a couple of the folks that were working with you. So Chris, Mike,
Charlotte.
definitely some feedback. Charlotte, just to go through some of the sections, just to highlight some of what could be a change, what could look a little differently. I know somebody up there asked about the bulk rate meters, and there's some language in there that I'd like to bring their attention. I just don't have the section memorized, Jessica.
Chris,
So
Charlotte, if you
high
don't mind,
flow-
just a second. Chris, Charlotte, if you don't mind just coming up, just pull up another chair. Members, real quickly, as they're coming out, what we're hoping to do here is to present the draft rules to you as they are, have the opportunity for you to be able to read them and take them home with you so that you can see what we're proposing as rules. Each one of you, I'm sure, will migrate to a particular section. As an example, Mr. Skurlock, I'm sure you'll probably want to see what anything in there are skimmers. For that, I would refer you to the AG's office.
Yeah.
So, but, again, I'm sure that Adam and Wes are probably looking for maybe something that has to do with LSCs and LSTs. So you'll probably migrate yourself there immediately, start reading those rules, but others will begin to start looking at rules as it depends on your particular, maybe the convenience station or suppliers or distributors that you're looking for. So I would say go through them, take a look. The rules group will have a lot of input in this. As Jessica was saying, if you've got questions, if you're not on the rules group, we encourage you to email her, provide her feedback, and give her information on that. So, but what we want to do is be able to present this to you at this time, just kind of as a general discussion. We're not going to delve deep into this right now. We'll have room for that, time for that down the road. But today it's just the opportunity to be able to bring them before you so that you can start taking a look at.
I did forget one important thing, sorry, Brian, which you may have talked about or we're about to talk about. So subchapter E is fees. You will see a lot of double X's. So that is generally the layout that we're looking at for that subchapter. However, we have blanks. So Brian, I will let you have that one because I know that is your thing. But that's why that looks like that for right now. But that is kind of what we're planning on doing. We've still got some work to do as far as devices. We're still working on that one. That's a little bit of a work in progress, which is why you see one or an alternative. But Brian, we'll talk to you more on that one.
And kind of walk you through, Brad talked about how many rule packages we've approved. I think it was 18 and there's 12 in the hopper. we do a lot of rules and for different programs. So we have a lot of experience in reviewing them. One of the things that has helped me to review rules is, as Derek laid out, you start with the statute. That's our framework. If it's in the statute, we can't go beyond that. We can provide more detail. We can provide granularity to say, how does this word, what does this word mean since they didn't define it here? So the statute is the standard. That's the umbrella. Nothing goes beyond that. For an example, Jessica gave me an opportunity to take a look at the rules, and yes, she gave me an opportunity to take another look at the rules. The team knows, if you run them by me, I'll make changes that I made before back to what it was before. So just, you get 2 runs with me. But I pointed out inconsistencies in the rule. I was like, why do we have a 1-year requirement for records, a 2-year requirement for records, and a 4-year requirement for records? Because it's in the law. That's why. But that's how nitpicky we're drilling down to the rules. Jason, if I had my way, we would have just a 2-year increment for record keeping, make it easy on you, but more importantly, make it easy on my inspectors and my investigators. They don't have to remember that for this particular rule, which is an invoice, it's 4 years, but for this one, it's 2 years. So those are the type of things, if you see that we've used a phrase or we've characterized something up here, we want to be consistent with it down here. It makes it easier, streamline, make it the same until it has to be different. Start with the statute when you're looking at the rules, then go through, circle, why is that? I use color coding, I use big question marks. That doesn't make sense. Maybe it's going to be explained a little later, Jason, but that doesn't make sense now to me. Why is that there? And then come back and see if the question was answered. And then also offer your input in saying, if it didn't make sense to me the first time I read it here, I would rewrite it this way. This speaks government. I would say that a normal human being, non-government person would understand, don't do that, as opposed to, this is a prohibition that could result in your feet being shackled together and your nose being pierced. Don't do that. Bad things can happen. That's the type of plain talk that we want you to interject in this process. What's going to work to your very brand new employee that's going through training, and you want to make sure that they comply so that your company is still seen in the right and proper light. So go through the rules in that direction. I put Charlotte and Chris on the spot because they were so involved in the conversations, but I don't know if there's any sections that you think we should highlight. I know we had a long back and forth on the satellite locations of, is the registration placed on the window of a satellite? Is it not? What's a satellite office? And we went back and forth on those type of elements, trying to proudly show our ignorance, which allows us to ask the questions that need to be asked on the front end. I think sometimes if you're too arrogant and think you know the answers, you miss a lot of stuff. But if you are, I'm proudly ignorant, I don't know what this means, now you're starting with a great place of asking questions to improve the process.
So just throwing this out there, if some of y'all have not caught this already, in 97.23, we have added some calibration. We have proposed some added calibration requirements. That is on page 8.
And 9.
So currently, the way the rule is written, it says that all motor fuel meters need to be calibrated every 2 years. This is both in statute and actually in rule. So the way we have written it, it explicitly says that basically all meters have to be calibrated. And so the way it's written, it says that all low flow, basically all low flow, has to be calibrated every 2 years, which is the current requirement. However, as of date to be set, basically all devices have to be calibrated every 2 years. So the rationale on that is obviously not only consumer protection for consumer protection, but also for industry as well. So we want to ensure that both the distributor, the supplier, that they're in working order, but basically everybody has devices that are working, meters that are working well. And we know that for most all of y'all, you're already doing this. So this is not something that's going to be new. So this is something that is definitely new, and this is why we've had a phase-in date. This is certainly something that we can look at. The date may or may not work, but this is why we're here to get your input on this change. So that's That's something that is substantially different from what was previously in place.
And Lane, that's going to be directly at you guys. We want your feedback on what that means, what happens out there for our LPG folks.
The other thing that you'll see is in 9750, basically in subchapter D, is our service companies and techs. That's where probably the biggest changes are going to be, and those are statutorily. So after Senate Bill 2119 passed, our biggest changes were to our service companies and our techs. What they both now have to go through criminal history checks. So previously there were no requirements for criminal history checks, and now not only do the service technicians require a criminal history check, the service companies also require a check. And not only is it the applicant, it's any controlling person of that applicant. So it may not just be the owner. If you've got a corporation, it may be any shareholder, depending up to 25%, that would also be subject to this criminal history check. Going back to what Brian discussed, this is where that criminal convictions guideline comes into place. What would exclude you from being a licensee for service companies or techs?
Do we have that guideline in place now?
That's for y'all to decide.
This is Christina Kaiser, Deputy Executive Director. The criminal conviction guidelines will be the first piece of work that the enforcement work group will take up with, along with Chris and probably some of the other folks in our enforcement division.
I think Chris has some information also.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to talk on the criminal conviction guidelines, Chris Russi, Management Analyst, Enforcement Division. This is new. It's statutory. You know, we don't have a choice in this matter, but, you know, y'all are going to lead this conversation. You know, those that this applies to and those in the public watching on TV or the internet. You know, I don't want y'all to think we're going to go through and we're just going to start revoking licenses left and right because you have a criminal history. You know, we want y'all's input on this. You know, specifically, what type of conviction? You know, how long ago was the conviction? You know, certain things like that. You know, does theft matter? Does the DWI matter? You know, these are all things that are going to be considered in these criminal conviction guidelines. And I just want to make really certain that y'all know that, you know, y'all are going to lead this conversation, and we're going to rely heavily on y'all for that.
And if you go to our webpage and look under all the programs, you're going to see the criminal conviction guidelines that we've established for the cosmetologists, for the barbers, for the professional employer organizations, their controlling persons, for the driver education schools, their controlling persons. So you'll get a sense of how it's worded, but you'll also have a very, very clear understanding that those criminal conviction provisions are tied directly to that person and their opportunity to maybe do that crime again. That's one of the standards. Having this license, are they going to be able to perpetuate that crime again? Are they going to be able to harm somebody in performing to the duties? I think it was Brad or somebody had pointed out that you have the DWI for our towing operators. Well, we don't have one for our cosmetologists.
Right.
We don't have that standard there because they're not, cutting hair while drunk and all that stuff. That's not one of the provisions that's in place. So you're going to have the opportunity to help us weigh through what's important to this industry. So the provision is new to your world. The process is not new to our agency. If you look at TDLR's track record, 600,000 renewals and new licenses in a year, about 23,000 of those folks had criminal convictions that triggered one of our guidelines. We referred about 3,000 of those to our enforcement division to take a closer look, should this person be in the business? And ultimately about 254 people had their licenses revoked or denied. The process whittles down because they have a review. We are a state that believes in second chances, giving people an opportunity to earn a livelihood. But we do look at it. It's a starting point that says, hey, we need to take a closer look. And then the process allows us to drill down, and make a decision.
So the other thing I think I failed to point out is that we have changed, or we're proposing to change the license term for all licenses and registrations to 2 years. So that means for device registrations, for your service companies, everything is going from 1 year to 2 years. The reason I bring that up, it's very important to note for service technicians, right? Because service technicians were previously 5 years, and now they're becoming 2 years. The other difference is that for service technician, they would take a test, and then they would come back in 5 years and take another test. So right now, they will be treated to where they would either come back to us and they would have a 2-year renewal, or, they start with us new, but it would be treated as a 2-year license with a renewal, not essentially almost like a new license. So that is something that we're working with, because obviously there needs to be some type of marker or testing to know that you're going along. There will not be another test. At some point in time, we need to consider possible continuing education. We don't have it in the rules right now, but it's a thought to have out there, because there is not going to be a requirement for a test. That is probably one of the biggest changes for service technicians, obviously apart from the criminal history check, is that they're going from a 5-year license to a 2-year license. So that's a big thing for them.
Will that change for the ones that are on 5 now?
So if they are renewed before August 31st at 5 years, they will continue on, and we will not change their terms. So they will expire when they expire. Okay. If they come in after September 1st, they will now be on that 2-year license.
Okay, thank you.
So that's how that term works.
Gotcha.
The other thing you'll notice is test standards in 9758. Nothing is changing there other than we have basically clarified and put out in a rule by itself that your test standards that you use to conduct those calibrations must be calibrated annually. That was already a requirement. All we did was put it into a rule and say, hey, you've got to calibrate annually, and it has to be at a lab that's ISO. So basically, if you're using the TDA lab or probably one of those that's right around here, it's going to meet that need. So we've put that there. The second part which says if your standards become damaged or they can't be repaired, you need to take them out of service or you need to get them calibrated. Something, again, you guys are already doing these things. We are just putting them into rule. Those are probably the most notable things. Like Brian said, we are bringing things over that are statutory. Anything that doesn't need to be there, we're trying to eliminate things that get in the way or become overburdensome. And so that's why you've seen the rules go down by over 50% in the word count. So trying to make them easy to understand.
I have one more question.
Yes, Les.
Earlier, when we were here this morning, I heard it 3 times that it was not statutory for the 2-year rule, but then now you're saying that it is. Is that regarding specific meters? I think we were talking about the fact that they had the regulation or they had to be calibrated every 2 years, and then I heard someone say that's not statutory, and then I heard you repeat that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So can you clarify what that
We
what
were
that
talking
means?
about inspections, weren't we?
Yes,
So-
yes, we were.
So the calibration of pumps is statutory.
Meters.
Meters is 2 years. That is statutory. They must be calibrated once
But
every 2
inspection
years.
is not statutory, is what you're saying. Because in my world, they're hand in hand.
Wes, I think a better way of saying it is, prior to 2174, that inspection authority resided with the Texas Department of Agriculture. They had inspectors and they did inspections based on that authority. When the changes came in law, it said, okay, those pumps and devices or meters will be calibrated by the LSTs and LSCs. The authority for the department to do a regular periodic inspection went away. So when we were having that conversation, we were talking about the department's authority to conduct a regular periodic inspection. In our world, there's not that authority. We have the ability to go and do the investigations and look into it if there's a complaint, but to have Tanya's team, remember Tanya didn't talk about her group going out doing inspections of these motor fields because that authority doesn't reside in the statute.
So I guess the reason I'm asking the question, that component no longer exists for someone to be able to register their location. That's a question, I guess. 'Cause that was
It's mandatory to register your location.
an inspection was when we were under the TDA.
So under TDA, the way statute was written, it says inspection and calibration every 2 years. Right. And so it still says essentially, and I'm trying to picture it, is inspection calibration. So basically, when you go out, you're inspecting and calibrating the pumps that they are to working order. Previously, before 2119, an LSC's function, essentially, was acting as TDA. They were acting as the eyes and ears of the department. And so that was the function of those calibrations. So that might have been somewhat why that language was there. Stuart might want to speak more to this, but the 2 years is still there. Stuart, do you want to say something? You might as well. So that 2-year requirement for calibration and inspection is still there statutorily. They must be done every 2 years before a renewal will be issued. Does that make sense?
So there is an inspection.
There are
Not by
two
the
totally
department.
different things. Yeah, they're two separate things that you're talking about. The word inspection, I think, is throwing you off.
Okay.
So the inspection requirement of TDLR is not there. We are not inspecting every 2 years. That is not in statute. What is in statute is for LSCs to go out and have the full site calibration every 2 years.
Okay, the
And that-
calibration, but we're talking about two different components again. And that's
I
where
understand.
the language is confusing because
Right.
we keep saying inspection, and inspection requires a report, where calibration is a completely different report.
Right. And so what's
where-
going to be required is the calibration.
The
And so I'm going to
calibration
let,
report is going to be required.
I'm going to let Stuart, because he understands the,
he knows
the
your
misunderstanding with the communication.
I'm sure he does.
Go ahead.
We've had this conversation.
Hello. Stuart Stenard, I'm TDLR. I'm the Business and Consumer Safety Manager. So I think there's always been a lot of confusion when we look at the verbiage that's used with calibration, inspection, and performance testing. Those are three keys, and I believe 2310 does recognize that verbiage plus a couple more under maintenance activities in the statute. So I think what you're getting at, Wes, is can a facility go out and have an inspection and performance test of the devices there that are in operation commercially, and does that suffice? Or are you going to have to break every seal on the meter and actually say calibrate it, right? Because if we're looking at a maintenance tolerance on this device, and it's within the handbook requirements, plus or minus 6 cubic inches, 5-gallon test measure, then it passes, right? Plus or minus.
Correct.
So you don't have to calibrate. And I think that's where we get tripped up on the language. Because I know, Adam, I believe you as well, y'all have test devices.
Right, and it's to me it's pretty clear because we do in a lot of other states where like you look at Alabama and they don't even recognize a calibration. They say an inspection and that includes the calibration.
right.
Whereas Texas says it's strictly calibration and that's all we report. On all the reporting is just strictly calibration, doesn't even ask about hanging hardware, displays and all that. And so when you get into a site inspection and you go out and you say, tell the customer, hey, you need a new hanging hardware, what they're going to do is most likely either tell you that do it or we'll take care of it, but there's nothing ever reported unless we wanted to report to TDL or TDLR or TDA. And so the inspection portion of it is a broad area, but it's never been in the code for TDA or here.
Yeah, it does say inspection in the, I believe it does in 2310, and it's defined as maintenance activity.
With a site inspection, in other words, you're looking at specific items. In other words, did they have their license displayed? That was one of the items that I learned that we had to look for. So that's why I'm going inspection, calibration, what are we talking about? I mean, we've got.
Right.
So I think part of that, this is Jessica Escobar. So again, I think part of that goes back to the post-2174 world, which for everybody watching and not understanding, House Bill 2174 passed, and essentially the licensed service company became the eyes and ears of TDA. And so in even looking for stickers and registrations and everything, that's why licensed service companies were having to jump through those hoops and do things like that, because they were acting as TDA inspectors, because TDA was no longer performing those services or performing that function. So that's why those things were having to be done by y'all after that bill was passed. So this is definitely something, I have notes that we actually just discussed this regarding the performance testing and full site calibration, and this is something that we are looking at as far as our rules and what we're needing to be doing or not needing to add a rule. And really it's a matter of what we're looking at on verbiage and how we need to treat that as far as this calibration requirement? Is it going to be a matter of redefining something? Are we redefining calibration to where it's broader? And there might be more than one definition. This is why we're turning to you, because now we're talking maintenance activities. So this is something where we need the ongoing discussion from y'all. So, yeah.
And I think what we're going to have also is that post-2174 changed the processes, but didn't change the verbiage. And so I think that's where we're getting the confusion at, is trying to bring everything up to date. I mean, that's where we can break it down to. Stuart?
Yes, back again, looking back historically at where TDA was in Chapter 13 and performing these inspections routinely, where 2174 took that then to the next level. I think it all goes back to, if you look at the intent, it's all back to maintenance requirements, right? And that's why I still say in 2310, you go to, in the statute here in 2310, when it talks about maintenance activities. And so I'm going to step out here and hope I don't get swatted for saying this, but if a device is inspected and performance tested, and it meets the handbook requirements, handbook NIST Handbook 44, then that counts as your calibration for the 2 years. But if it does not meet the handbook and it is not accurate, then it has to be calibrated, right?
Correct.
So I think all those words kind of collide.
So, Charlotte Melder again, and yes, we actually had a meeting yesterday trying to figure out how to word it to make it say that without that many words. So we're like, testing for calibration, it's been fully tested, we're trying to figure it out. And we'll work with you guys in the work groups to figure out how to word that, but that is the intent.
Okay.
We can plain talk
One
it.
more.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, because he
That's
just
good.
nailed another topic that I have. I was looking through this draft, and it actually states that we're using Handbook 130, not Handbook 44.
It says both.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't find 44 anywhere.
44 is actually on number 1 of 97.3. It's on the legal standards, because that's the weights part, weights and measures.
97.
It's on page 4.
Way past that. Apologize for that.
That's all right.
Does 103, what is that referring to? The
Handbook 130?
Yeah,
That's for the fuel quality.
that's for fuel quality, gotcha.
There's also, I'm sorry, I'm butting in. You just got to put tape over my mouth, but 130 also, if you look in the front of it, it also talks about general weights and measures laws, and sometimes it's the catch-all. If you understand NIST Handbook 44 and how it's laid out and how to use it, and I know the service techs do for sure because they look at it daily. The general code is the catch-all for all the sections, following. Well, Handbook 133 is basically, in the beginning of it is the general weights and measures. So if you look overall, it'll tell you a lot of its method of sale, and just other catch-alls. It's a general section of 130, but it is fuel quality, motor fuel quality is in Handbook 130, other than uniform labeling and method of sale.
Is this the sort of stuff that's going to be talked about with the?
Yes, so the rules group will go through a lot of this. So if you're not on the rules group, like I said, if you're seeing something that is bothering you or that you caught or you just want to contribute to, email me. So going, kind of segue into what I was going to talk about next. So we have a very fast and furious schedule to make sure we're on track for September 1st. So in order for us to meet all of our timelines, we have to basically get ready to submit our rules for proposal on April 20th. So basically, we work backwards on a lot of timelines. We need to have our rules ready for adoption and to be effective on September 1st. So that means we have to work off of, as Brian and everybody was saying, we need to be sure our commission is ready to adopt these. They also have to sign off on these. So that means we've got to work off of a July commission date. So everything we work off works backwards. And so this April 20th date is kind of my drop dead. I need to have this date. And so to make sure we do that, that starts with my rules committee. We need to probably start meeting next week. So we're probably looking at a Thursday afternoon or a Friday meeting, and we will probably meet again after that. We are looking to have a next work group here sometime April, and we'll talk about that later. But we need to keep going on this for now because there's still a lot of work to be done. Hopefully not a ton of work. So hopefully these are going in the right direction for y'all, and that way we can keep moving on the rules. The process is going to be that we will have our rules work group meetings, and then we will bring everything back to you as a large work group. We will have our advisory group. Sorry, it's kind of backwards for this group. We will have our advisory group meetings on rules, and then as we bring everything together, we make changes to the rules. I will bring those back to you. We'll have our group. We'll bring everything to you, and you can review the final proposal before it is submitted. Let us know if there's anything else that you want to change, and then at that time we'll get ready to submit them for proposal. After that, then 2 weeks later they get published in the Texas Register. We have a 30-day comment period where everybody is able to submit comments. We take those comments at the end of the 30-day comment period. We'll review them, summarize them, and then everything we will bring back and review. We'll allow you guys to look at those comments, see what you have to say, and then from there we'll prepare the adoption of the rule, and then that's what has to go over to the commission. And so it's quite a lengthy process. So we're in February, but I'm already fast and furious to get to September 1, which is, it sounds like it's a really long ways away, but it's not. April 20th is really soon. So start reading up now and let us know what we can help you with or any questions you guys have.
In regard to the advisory groups, the folks that, Chris Russey for enforcement will be reaching out to the chair, setting and coordinating with Delia on here's going to be the date for the conference call. Everyone in, make the call, have an agenda, what's going to be discussed, provide you any copies of anything that needs to be done in that meeting. The month of March will be some heavy lifting for the inspection calibration group. The rules group will get at the tail end of that as Jessica's pulling it all together, but March and first part of April are going to be work group heavy or advisory group heavy activity moments to get this language right and to make sure we're saying it correctly.
Any other questions concerning the rules at this point in time that you would like to put out to Jessica, Chris, Charlotte, or Stuart? I know that we've given you a lot. Some of you have already, I know, printed out and have it. If you don't have a copy, if you prefer a hard copy, we can get you a hard copy before you leave. I believe that a draft copy was emailed to you, so you all have that, should have that in your email. And if you don't have it in your email, then check with Delia to make sure that we do have your correct email. So, but we do want you to be able to start reviewing that and taking a look at it so that when the rules subgroup works next week, and again, we're probably looking at either a Thursday afternoon or Friday morning date. So if you can carve out some time there, maybe an hour, hour and a half to be able to talk through that. Jessica will try to keep you on the phone for 2 hours, but hold her down to about an hour and a half at the most, so that we can get some of this carved out and get that going. But again, you'll have your staff liaison reach out to you to start scheduling work group meetings, and it's going to be based on some of these rules. It's going to be based on current practices that we have. Recommendations of what you think needs to change. If we can change it from a rule standpoint, then let us know. We'll be more than happy to address it. I understand if it's statutory, then there's nothing we can do until there's a statutory change made. So, but if it's a rule change that we can do, then we'll take a look at it and see if it's what's best for the industry and everybody wants that, then we'll definitely take a look and do that. So, any other questions right now for the four that are sitting up here? I'm trying to wind this up. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm trying to wind it up. I know it's been a long day for a lot of you that came in at 9 o'clock and have been here. And I'm sure that you're ready to go. We'll move on to items G and actually H. If there's anything that you would want to have in the next meeting, I would tell you right now that we're looking at sometime in mid-April. But if there's an agenda item that you would want to have on there, know that the work groups, we will be expecting a report back during that meeting also, whenever we meet. So as Brian was mentioning, in the month of March, there'll be a lot of heavy lifting going on. But when we all get back together, we'll see the fruits of that in that next meeting of all the work that's going to be done. So unless there's something that we haven't covered in the sub-work groups, if you have something that you want to discuss, then we'll be more than happy to bring it up at that point in time also and have it in our meeting. So feel free to reach out to Delia with that. Yes, sir.
I'd kind of like to hear more about what information is in your script for collecting at the time a complaint is made.
Okay.
Okay.
We can do
Because I think that'll help steer, what questions the investigator actually asks, and we can help narrow down what information is really important.
Sure.
To help
That's a
make that
great point.
determination versus, things that may not be true.
Absolutely.
Great point.
Absolutely. We'll make sure we have an overview of the information that's captured in the complaint.
I would make note also that in the audience, we do have Johnny Hatcher, who has been appointed to be the point person for the Fusion Center out of the Attorney General's office. He's with us here, and so I do want to recognize him. There's not a lot of discussion been held on skimmers, but we do have that as a part of our sub-work groups. So as mentioned earlier, the skimmer piece, while the rules lie with the Attorney General's office, there's no way that we can separate the two for motor fuels. And so that's the reason that we look for the skimmer groups to be able to have a lot of discussion so that we can make sure, I'm sure Brad has opened up the opportunity for us to be able to discuss with them from the Attorney General's office, that discussion with them and also with the Fusion Center. So I know that there's going to be a lot of dialogue going back and forth, so I do appreciate Mr. Hatcher being with us here. I guess the next question I have for the work group is, do you prefer a morning meeting or an afternoon meeting? Morning? Mornings? Okay. That being the case, we can meet either April the 14th or April the 15th in the morning.
What dates?
April 14th or April 15th.
I'll be unavailable both of those days. I believe Adam will be as well. We have to be in Salt Lake City for a seminar.
Okay. Well, we can just move the meeting to Salt Lake City.
We can work with you then.
And the reason that I'm proposing those dates, as you mentioned, or as you heard earlier, Jessica saying that April 20th is pretty much her drop dead date for these rules, and that's the reason we're looking at either the 14th or 15th at this point in time.
Are you going to have enough time if you meet on the 14th or 15th?
Sure.
We will, because what we do is we normally chain our general counsel to the desk so that they can't leave in that time frame.
This is Jessica Escobar. So the rules are, I will have a prepared rule proposal package at that time. So the only thing should be if you guys have, I feel like I'm not talking, if you have any minor edits at that time, that will be basically what we're doing after that date. It should be a full ready package to file on Monday morning.
So there'll be plenty of time for that.
The advisory groups is where the wrestling and the work has to take place. Come with your ideas and you can have polar opposite positions. But working through those issues and getting the language to get those in Jessica's hand for the full group to work on that's going to be the key.
So does the 14th or 15th, either day work better, is one day better than the other?
I prefer the Wednesday.
Day before taxes are due.
Either's fine.
That is tax
Yeah,
day.
either works for me. Yeah, 15th is tax day.
Yeah. Working all day on the 14th. Taxes.
Either day works for me.
Either's fine.
Either?
I'm good.
Either. Okay. We may look at the 15th. Yes, that way it gives you one extra day to prepare your taxes before you have to come down here. So 9 a.m., is 9 a.m. start time good for everyone? Good. So right now, let's go ahead and pencil it in. Unless we hear anything back within the next couple of days, we'll go ahead and put that in ink. But right now, we're looking at April the 15th at 9 a.m. We'll hold our next motor fuels work group. Before you leave, I do want to mention that we did put the sticker up on the screen, so you can see if you have not had the opportunity to take a look at it, it is there. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen it, but I did ask Tila to pull it up, and she did. Thanks, Tila, for that. And so that you do have the opportunity to take a look at it.
It's in your book, too.
And it's in the book. Okay, I didn't notice that. That's good. Okay, so it's in the book, so you have it.
Tab 3.
Yeah, Tila's way ahead of me, I'm telling you. I'm always behind the curve here. The other thing is don't forget that Tila has asked that we take the pictures so that we can put it out on our website. So what I want to do is go ahead and adjourn this meeting. If there's nothing else to come before that, we'll just plan on seeing everyone here present on Wednesday the 15th at 9 a.m. for our next Motor Fuels Work Group meeting. And at that point in time, we should have a lot of the lifting done. You're going to see a lot of great progress by the sub-work groups at that point in time. And I know that you now have the opportunity to be able to provide us a lot of the input, so we look forward to having that come to us. So that being the case, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.